parents are often very like worried about, all this, like, you can't show that you're kind of a angry person with feelings, and I think that's kind of a mistake. I think kids have to see parents as human and fallible, but able to apologize and shift and change also, right? Yeah.
Welcome to LOVELINK, your guide to love and sex in all forms. We're your hosts, Simone Humphrey and Sina Simon. Our guest today is a parenting expert and founder of the coaching service Family Matters New York. With her solution-oriented approach, she's been helping parents and kids navigate challenges for over 30 years. Here to talk to us about parenting babies and toddlers is Alice Kaltman.
All right. So, welcome, Alice Kaltman. It's so good to have you on LOVELINK.
I'm very happy to be here. I think it's just a great idea, and I'm really happy to talk to you guys.
And we're especially excited because Simone and I both have a child now, so we have lots of questions for you.
I know. When you guys sort of sent me like a preview of what you might ask me, I'm like, these are clearly two new moms who are like have this basically on their minds all the time, hopefully keeping it a little bit at bay when they're dealing with their clients, but probably not, because it's hard when you're a new mom to not think about anything else. So
Absolutely. I know, especially when you're working from home now and you're having to like parallel your attention between client and a crying baby.
Yeah.
That is tough.
It's really tough.
Yeah. We could probably do a whole podcast on parenting during COVID, but maybe that's for another time.
Yeah.
So before we kind of get started into all of our detailed questions about being a parent, tell us a little bit about how you got into parenting and parent coaching.
Well, I have been practicing as a psychotherapist for 30 years now, in private practice for 30 years. And I started out early on as a couples and family therapist, sort of specializing in more systems work and strategic family therapy. So it's sort of more Ackerman family-based sort of approach to couples and families. And but then, of course, that kind of, as practices sort of develop over time, I would see individuals also. I sort of kind of always had a specialty in dealing with creative artists. And early on, I had a sort of worked a lot with the family of eating disordered families, which was always, a laugh riot. So I guess really what happened in terms of my interest in parenting per se is that I've always been a very directive therapist. I'm a restless, impatient creature by nature. So sitting with people's feelings and just, processing on the sort of deep emotional level was sort of, I don't think was ever my jam or my forte. I mean, I could do it and I was good at it, but particularly with families and couples, I felt really depleted afterwards. And I also noticed that particularly, my hat is off to you guys as couples therapists, and I'm always saying this to my colleagues who are couples therapists, is like, I get so fucking sick. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on your...
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, okay. I would get very, fed up with sort of what was the regressive infantile behavior of couples who mostly come into couples therapy when their relationships are pretty much on the skids anyway, and so all of the regressive infantile behavior would just drive me crazy. And my impulse always in therapy, even with individuals, is to say, so all right, so this is fine, but so what are you gonna do about it? I was very much more of an action oriented therapist from the get-go. So moving into sort of a parent focused coaching sort of business as opposed to a therapy business sort of evolved about, I'd say 10 to 8 years ago. And I just thought, I'm really good with kids. I also loved working with kids. So I did a lot of individual work with kids. But of course, obviously when you work with kids, you end up working with the parents also. So sort of finding creative strategies for people that, kind of were tailor-made to their particular dynamics as parents and their kids. I was also finding, and it's even more so now, that the generation of parents from, again, like 10 years ago coming forward to now, just like overwhelmed with information and books and, websites, and everybody's on their phones constantly seeing other people's pictures of family gatherings. And so it's like there's all this sort of bombardment, both of like concrete information and false information, right? So it always has felt very grounding to have like parents in my office just sort of being dealt with like as individuals, so that sort of is how my parent coaching business pretty much evolved, I guess. So I don't know if that answers.
And just for our listeners, can you describe the difference between like psychotherapy and coaching? I mean, you've alluded to it, like coaching is more directive, but I'm curious if you could say a few things about that difference.
Yeah, it's very directive. So like I will be talking to people and they'll, for example, they might be giving me an example of something that their kid does that drives them crazy. And I'll right away say, okay, why don't you try this, right? Set a timer, have a real clock, let's say if it's a thing about like transitions or getting out the door. I don't wait to hear a long explanation necessarily before I'm kind of interjecting advice pretty much the whole hour. So people come out of it with a whole kind of notebook full of like techniques to use potentially. I mean, that's not to say that I'm not still like kind of paying attention to like underlying, psychodynamics, because I'm not going to tell kind of a person who I don't think can hear or do something that's really playful if they are clearly not a playful person. I'll try to maybe get to a place where their strengths as a parent can be expressed a different way, but I'm not reflecting back a lot. I'm mostly taking in and doing my own kind of synthesis of, after 30 years, I'm pretty good at this, of like where people are at, and then giving them advice that I think they can hear.
Which I have to say, I feel like with parenting, coaching makes a lot of sense. Like there's so much anxiety, there's so much need for direction. And like you said, there is so much information out there, so many resources. I mean, just in the sleep alone, I've been given 3 different books. There's so many different like educational workshops. I mean, it's hard to know what the best thing is. And when there's too much, that just escalates the anxiety. So I can imagine for the parents that are in your office, it's so regulating to have someone say, okay, we know your situation, and these are some concrete things that you can walk away with trying.
Exactly. And it's also kind of, there's a lot of what I do, particularly with parents of younger kids, is really, I feel like a lot of it is talking them down off the ledge. Like they think that their kids are going to become psychopaths if, they push somebody off a slide. They think their kids are, have ADHD because they, won't listen to them at 4:00 in the afternoon. Or, there's like a lot of stuff that parents have assumptions about or make assumptions based on behavior that is completely not necessarily true, right?
So your work is just a lot of normalizing.
There's a lot of normalizing, and a lot of like kind of trying to support people's strengths, and kind of like bring that out so they can feel sturdier and like in their decision making, and also just to kind of normalizing that like pretty much everybody's life is a complete chaotic mess for at least the first 5 years of parenting. So,
oh God, buckle in,
right,
buckle in.
Right, be prepared. And then you go through this like halcyon phase when kids are like really cute and they love you till they're about 12, and then it like goes to hell again till they're about 16, 17. So sort of.
So you see new parents and then you see them a little bit later on.
Mostly. It's interesting how it breaks down that way. It's like, I mostly see people whose kids are under 6, and then I see people whose kids are in high school. So it's, that middle area where you're not like, rejected entirely. Or and I mean, they always say adolescence is the second experience of toddlerhood. It's sort of the same kind of separation and
acting out.
Yeah, the limits, yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking, when we were talking about being a new parent, there is a lot of information overload. And also I feel very at sea. Like, we don't get any training on being a parent when we're growing up, and most people, I didn't get any from my mom either until I actually had a kid. And then it was like, suddenly you're bombarded with all of this new information. And so to have a coach like you seems very, very helpful, to be able also to sort through all that noise. And I wonder, just thinking about all the noise that's out there, like, what are some of the common misconceptions that people come in with when they see you about parenting and about what they should? I'm sure there are, there's a laundry list, but what are some of like the major ones that you see when people are coming into your office as new parents?
Well, I would say one of the biggest conflicts I see sometimes is, or what people want some kind of like sort of middle ground about, is sort of the difference between like limit setting and consequences and permissiveness, right? So there's always like, are we being too permissive? Are we being too strict? Are we, like that I think is a big thing, because people, these babies come out and they're like nature and nurture little, kind of moldable things. So everybody wants to know, like, well, do we like say, no, you can't have that now? Or do we say, yeah, okay, you can have that now? It's sort of, so I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, right? Limit setting, scary. I guess, is what it is.
And it's scary, I think, as a parent to know how much power, or to think how much power you have. Like, if I don't set enough limits, they're going to be, right, like a psychopath who's going to just feel entitled and take over the world. If I do too much, they're going to either rebel or push back, or maybe they're going to retreat. The consequences feel really high risk.
Exactly. Yeah. And particularly in the early years, when they sort of don't have language yet, or just starting to have language, and you don't really know like what's really going on in their brains, it's very difficult to know like how much to set limits. I think one thing I'd say to almost every, I bring a lot of like developmental stuff into the sessions too, so there's a certain psychoeducational component too about the sort of belief that all kids under the age of 8 don't care what kind of attention they get. They'll go for whichever is the most rewarding and easiest to get. So that's why a lot of kids will keep pushing buttons and sort of just constantly put themselves in positions where their parents feel like they have to reprimand them, because they haven't made that link yet to like, oh, it feels better to be good and get good things. They're just like, they'll go for the attention however they want, right? And that's kind of a developmental thing. Another like thing that parents always have to keep in mind is that, again, particularly like I'd say up to 5 or 6 kids are completely present focused. Like whatever they're doing, and this isn't because they're trying to like not listen to you or be difficult. It's like, if they're on the ground like playing with Legos and you're like, come on, it's time to go to Disneyland, they're not going to be like, even though you're doing this cool thing that they've been expecting and you've been talking about, they'll be like, no, I'm like, solving world hunger. I've got like the real, like I've got the real cure. So you have to think of that way. It's like they are like, they have the cure for COVID in the Legos, right? Like that's how it feels to them. So it's like you can't like break into that and expect it's going to be easy, right? And that's a big thing for parents. Like they don't get it. It's like we're offering this like fabulous like thing right here and out the door, and you're still here on the floor, with the half stale piece of toast and your Legos. It's just like, but that's where the kids are.
So how do you help these parents help the kids transition?
Well, a lot of stuff with the present focus thing is I often use a technique with parents. It's like calling a show, because I have a background as a performing artist, so I was a professional dancer for many years, and I don't know, when you call a show, you have like an hour to curtain. So we talk about like, even like for kids who are old enough to comprehend like an analog clock, you getting like a big real clock, and really kind of just making distinctions between the periods of time, like when the big hand is here and the little hand is here, this is the period of time where you get to do this. And then at each transitional point, parents have to like get down on their kids' level and look them right in the eye and make sure their kids have eye contact with them. And they kind of say, so what's the next thing on the agenda? And the kids have to say what it is. And then the parents, then the parents can like leave and go and do whatever they're going to do for the next 15 minutes. And you keep coming back, and you can't like do the thing where you call from the other room, so there's a lot of sort of advanced preparation that, helps that kind of like, whoa, wait a second, it's time to leave, everyone has to kind of do it and be kind of organized in it. I mean, within the little periods of time, there's play and sort of looseness. But at all those points of calling for the show, when you get to the end, it's like, first one you have like half hour to curtain, right? Then you have 15 minutes to curtain. Then you 10, 5, 1. So it gets closer towards the end when you're sort of about to go out on stage, but or out the door to school or leaving the playground or whatever it is. And so the transition, that's one of my favorite things to kind of share with people, and it means parents being part of it. Also another thing is not having the expectation that the kids are going to do it without clear motivation.
But you don't want to set them up for failure.
Yeah, and none of the stuff I ever offer to parents ever works unless the parents are fully committed to it first, right? Because kids pick up on that, right? They have like ESP. They know when you're like really in it or not. So
right.
And what do they do if they can sense you're not in it?
They won't do it. Why should they? Why should they invest their, kind of shifting of behavior in something that their parents clearly are not invested in,
I'm really curious to hear about how you help parents manage temper tantrums, because that is something, I have a lot of clients actually who have young kids, and that comes up again and again. It creates conflict between the parents. It creates conflict with the child. Sometimes the child favors one parent when they're having a temper tantrum, and only one parent can soothe them. I mean, it's all kinds of psychodynamic stuff we could get into around that, but I'm wondering how you help parents through that.
Well, that's like a whole session. Right, that's often like, and that's a lot about taking in people's sort of emotional auras, like parents' sort of vibes, and seeing like what kind of energy they present and what kind of energy their kids get off of them. So that's one thing I do for myself. I'm a firm believer in, you can't teach during a tantrum. Tantrums aren't time for words. Tantrums are very kind of time for sort of physical de-escalation. And so there's a great, what's his name? I think his name is Jed Baker. He has a good book out that's called No More Meltdowns. And he does a lot of stuff along the lines that I believe in, which is identifying for yourself as a parent before you get pulled into the kind of energy of the tantrum. Like, is this hunger? Is this fatigue? Is this overstimulation? Or is this manipulation, right? So if it's a manipulative tantrum, like they're kind of doing it so that you'll give them the thing they want that they really don't need or shouldn't have, then there are other things you might do around that. But in the moment, the main thing is to get your kid, a kid who's having a tantrum is in a state of disequilibrium, and they need to be balanced. So, I'm just going to tell you a few things I talk to people about, but, again, it varies depending on the situation, the age of the kid, the size of the kid, but lots of times it's about, sort of bear hugging and breathing, and just getting a kid to do some deep breathing with a parent, and that means being able to tolerate holding and squirming. It's great if you can get them from the back around the front so that they can feel your chest against their back and feel your breathing sort of going on, and not, and this is a big thing with any kind of disruptive behavior sort of stuff that people want help with is just the language you use isn't like, you need to calm down. It's like, whoa, I'm feeling really stressed out, buddy. I need to calm down. Can you help me calm down? I'm feeling really I'm upset right now. Not like, you need to calm down. You need to calm down. You need
because
to do
what that's blaming.
It's blaming.
It feels attacking.
It's attacking, and it's also spotlighting, right? So if you take on, the more parents can take on the emotional sort of gestalt of what's going on with their kid, and not ever even put it on the kid until they're older, the better. Like, it's like, whoa, I'm so tired. I really think I need to go to sleep. Oof, I'm exhausted. I need a nap. I'm going to go lie down in the other room. I'm so tired. Will you come with me? Like, never like, it's time for your nap, or I'm really hungry. Oh, I'm really hungry for dinner. I wonder what's for dinner. Yum. Ooh, pasta. Oh, tomatoes. Whatever. It's like, you just like are your kid in these situations,
which is
yeah. So that's,
which is so true. I'm thinking about the times when I get like really low blood sugar level and I'm really hungry, and I'm so kind of distressed. I don't even have the hunger cues, and it takes someone else being like, let's put some food in front of us. I mean, like that way of kind of managing, but that requires a kind of a emotional maturity and ability to regulate from the parent too,
exactly. Yeah.
And especially during those tantrums, when I'm sure parents are also in this state of distress and kind of panic.
Yeah.
How do you help parents kind of calm their own nervous
systems?
Well,
they have to with your kids old enough, or if you can make sure they're in like a safe space, just even taking like 5 minutes to go into another physical environment yourself and sort of do some deep breathing and just say, detach, detach, detach. This isn't about my kid's need to control me. This is a moment where I need to kind of just like go in there and, just get them to a state of balance. It's not about what I assume this behavior means, or that they're doing this intentionally. I mean, kids are hardwired to push our buttons. It's kind of how far, how fast, how long, like how they're testing limits to figure out what the limits are. And it's really like, ideally what parents are doing is showing them where the boundaries are and the limits are in a kind of, not completely, heartbreaking way. Like, oh, there are limits in the world. Oh, damn. It's like, oh, okay. So then maybe that's better that I don't, run out into traffic, because there are cars in the road,
Oh God.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say that's one area. Like, if a kid is in danger, like physical danger, that's at one point where I'm always a firm believer in like very firm, authoritative, on the verge of yelling kind of voice, right? If they're going to like hurt themselves, or they're about, going to really hurt somebody else, you're allowed to go, don't do that. And then, when at a later time, when everyone's calm, well rested, well fed, and in a good mood, you can revisit the situation and talk about it more kind of in a calmer way. But in those moments,
and it also makes sense that you want it to be memorable enough. Like, you want it to jostle the kids so that they now remember, oh my God, running into the street means mom's going to get really angry.
Exactly.
Like that kind of mini trauma is probably important to like metabolize.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I find like parents are often very like worried about like, all this, like, you can't like show that you're kind of a angry person with feelings, and I think that's kind of a mistake. I mean, I think kids have to see parents as, as human and fallible, but able to apologize and shift and change also, right? Yeah.
Right. So, I love this idea of it's okay to be angry in the moment, but then when you're calmer later on, you can talk about it. You can repair. You can help the kid understand why you went to that place.
Yeah, I think like a lot of times, even if parents lose their shit like once or twice a day, it's not like a kid is being traumatized by constant barrage of negativity, right? Those are the kids I worry about, the ones who are being raised in situations where they're constantly hearing yelling, they're constantly being yelled at, whether or physically abused. I mean, it's like, that's when, you get trauma. right? That's when you get kids who have to, to work with them in a trauma framework. But like if once a day, it's like, I've said this 1,000 times, get dressed. That happens once a day. It's not going to be the end of the world for your kid, right? It's really not. And parents worry about that a lot. They come in and they're like really worried that that's going to really, traumatize their kids.
They're probably in deep shame about their own behavior. Yeah. What about parents fighting in front of their kids? Because I imagine, that happens I've seen that happen. It happens all the time. What kind of advice do you give parents around their disagreements or even fights? How to manage that with the kid, and like, if it does happen?
Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah. Grow a pair. Save your bullshit. That's why I went into parent coaching. I have no tolerance for couples acting like children when they're raising children around their children. They can go act like children at their couples therapy session, or they can go act like children like when their kids are asleep. But when you're with your kids, for me, it's all about being the best parents you can be. And if you're sitting in my office, I'm going to assume that that's what you want to do. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to give you advice how to do it. And, be the grown-ups and contain it.
Because it's really scary for the kid.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And kids think they're completely narcissistic. They think everything in their world is because of them and for them, right? So parents are fighting because of them, or parents are fighting, there must be something wrong with them that their parents are fighting, right? It's not, they can't make that separation. Which is why, why it's not a good thing to do.
And if it does happen, what do you, like, if, there's some situation where it's the emotion spills over and it does happen, what do you recommend?
For little kids, fake making up in front of them. Kissing, hugging, I love you, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry too, shouldn't have yelled at you, I don't really mean that. Fake it.
Which is probably faking it probably helps actually the repair with the parents too.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it. You've maybe made it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A little dishonesty is not so bad.
Yeah, kids have to see the physical making up to believe that everything's okay.
I love that because, we try our best not to fight, but it's going to happen. I'm sure with everyone, you fight in front of kids. Hopefully it's in a healthier way. But I love this idea of it's okay. Just make sure that they can watch you make up.
Yeah, exactly. And for parenting couples who are basically integrated and solid relationships, the bickering or little fights. Yeah, again, if the kids see a makeup, if the kids see affection, if the kids hear you guys go like, that was really bad of us. Sorry about that. Our bad, or if one parent in particular was like really acting badly, for them to apologize, and for the other one to be like, it's okay, honey, I still love you. Kids need to see that, right?
And it's a little bit counterintuitive because people don't necessarily want to be dishonest about their feelings, right? Like it feels like a little bit like a manipulation or something, like we're going to make up and pretend it's okay. But that makes a lot of sense that that's really important. Yeah.
It's also really interesting thinking about this from a couples therapy perspective, because so many couples come in and talk about their own parents and what they learned and didn't learn. And I would say like a common theme is people that come in and say, I saw my parents fight and I never saw them make up. Or I never saw my parents fight, but there was always this feeling of anger, and so it's also, it does have that impact, and you can see it as adults.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the self-blame that comes up over and over again.
Yeah, what did I, like there's something that I'm responsible for that made this happen, or,
Here's a common question. I've had it, I feel like some of my peers have had it, my clients, around the crying out method, to do it or not to do it. I'm sure you get this a lot, and I'm curious what your take is, because I feel like there's so many different theories, there's so many different kind of philosophies around it. You need to let them self-soothe, but then if you neglect them too much, you're traumatizing them. What are your thoughts on crying out method?
I'm like a very you got to do what works for you. really. It's like so kind of wide ranging. I'm like, family bed, go for it. Cry it out, go for it. Something in between, go for it. It's really, that's one of the things where there's really a no size fits all sort of approach. Some kids just even from from infancy to, when they're older can tolerate sort of separation much more easily than others. And some kids experience timeouts as, abandonment. Others are like, cool, I'll go to my room by myself. That's fine. And there's no there's not like a reason that, I don't think there's ever as much a reason about like, how they've been raised that leads to that. I think a lot of that is sort of like constitutional and predisposed and genetic. So again, I feel like given people's if people have like jobs they have to get up for at a certain hour and their kids are like driving, if sleep deprivation is really an issue and making you not half the person you want to be in the beginning, then do something more structured and the cry it out sort of thing. That said, I find little kids crying just way too, sort of like, traumatizing.
Pulls at the heartstrings.
Pulls at the heartstrings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, like there are sound canceling headphones and, things like that that can help. But yeah, there's no one way of dealing with it with the infants and with little babies. It's just,
It sounds like goodness of fit. I mean, it's fit. It's like both fit for the kids, fit for the parents, fit for their dynamic.
Exactly. And not feeling shame, again, not feeling shame or blame for doing it one way or another, right? It's sort of, there's always going to be that other person on the playground who did it another way, who's like going to be like, oh, you're letting them cry it out? Or like,
right.
Oh,
There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame that parents have, but there's a lot of judgment too. I mean, there's a reason for that shame, and I see it in the way that people talk about other people's parenting all the time. Oh, this person's too permissive, or oh, they let this child cry for too long, or they came and coddled them. I mean, it's like, porridge is always too hot, too cold. Like parents really are set up to oftentimes not get it right in the eyes of others.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of, it's hard to not, and one thing I will say to people when they're really feeling that judgment thing is that like people who are judging you are generally doing it because they don't feel too solid in themselves, right? People don't go around being like super judgy unless they themselves are kind of insecure, right? Or they're questioning their own motivations or reasons for things. So, I mean, that's tough because it's like, particularly young parents of young kids, you're in such a vulnerable state and sleep deprived. And, so you're really like set up to be like kind of porous and take in all those like weird vibes from more judgmental people.
Especially when it comes from family. Because I remember, like with the sleep training thing, my mom was very anti-sleep training. And my mother-in-law is very pro-sleep training. And it was like, oh God, I'm going to do the wrong thing.
There's like something about this process of grandmothers transitioning to grandmothers and having to let their daughters be moms that I think is like upsetting. It's a process, like they're losing control and power, and then the daughter who's now becoming the mother is both feeling like I still need to listen to my own mom, I'm questioning myself, but I also want to take ownership. It's like a real transition of role and identity.
And they are not sure exactly what they're supposed to say or do sometimes. I mean, there are some who sort of like rush in as if the grandchild is their own baby, but then there are the others that are like kind of do like a little bit of a sidesteppy thing, which is like, you might want to see if her diaper needs to be changed, right? It's not like direct. It is. I think you're right. It's a real transition for everybody. And it can be, it's another relationship to navigate. It's actually a great workshop for me to do. I'm now thinking. Right?
Yeah, for new moms.
With moms and
new
grandmoms.
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because also I think there is a real longing for new moms to have their mother there. Like they also want their mothering. They want the support. They want to be fueled. And so that ends up getting kicked up too. Yeah.
And let's not forget the men too, because I
Yes,
feel
yes.
like a lot gets placed on women, and men need to take more of a role.
Well, men need to take more of a role, and women have to stop being gatekeepers, and men have to just step up to the plate. But it's hard for men to step up to the plate when they're being kind of micromanaged. This is also one of the things I love doing is working with dads and empowering dads, and all the incredible stuff. I think through Gottman, particularly the studies they did on how important it is for the kind of energy that men bring to parenting, the high kind of, they're much more sort of, they're better at like sort of rough and tumble play, which is really great for intellectual development and sort of physical coordination, but literally for the kids' brains. I remember when my daughter was young and I was learning about this stuff, and the higher, throwing her up and letting her fall on the bed, and like all the kind of like crazy wild games that my husband would play with our daughter, and I'd be a little bit like, wah, don't break her. Ended up like serving her well. Also just if they go out wearing like mismatched socks or no hat. I mean, the thing is that men are so much more easily criticized for their parenting in public than women. Like all the mamas who will come up to a kid in a stroller who's not wearing their coat and will say to a dad, that kid should really have a coat on. Like they wouldn't do it to another mother, but they'll do it to a dude, and it's like, it's not cool.
It's like this assumption of incompetence,
which
I imagine just fuels the father's questioning his own ability and then taking a further backseat.
Yeah.
So what do you do with dads to kind of empower them, to help them take a
lot of it is telling moms to get out of the way. And also like letting dads kind of find their own groove of like what they're really good at. Like some dads are really great at doing sort of game playing, like they have more tolerance for board games and block building and that kind of stuff. And also just taking part in cooking meals, even if you cook crappy food. It's like making food and cleaning up and just being as much a participant as possible. It's the more it can be shared, the better. And it's hard in the beginning because babies need their mommies for physical stuff, and they tend to be much more sort of mommy-centric until they're like 2-3 years old, and then sometimes dads become, particularly for little boys, like dads become sort of like, whoa, I kind of look like him.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
So, and for neither parent to ever feel, like their day will come. It does. If they're around and they're present, they will, they will become front and center for certain periods of time. So.
Right. Because it's hard, right? It must be hard for the parent who is not feeling like the preferred parent, like the favoritism that kind of waxes and wanes over time.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes, like, what will happen is when kids are very kind of connected to their moms and the moms leave the house, and, you can hear them going, Mommy, I want my mommy. Mommy. It usually always ends after like 5 minutes. It doesn't last. And like, so you have to like stop standing by the door and listening. You just have to like leave the house. Just go. And even if it goes on for half an hour, it's just still kind of, it's a bonding experience between, dad and the kid. Right? Oh, yeah, mommy's not here. Oh, I miss her too. Like you join with it or somehow. But
right.
I hear a lot of what you're talking about has to do with parental engagement and being really attuned to kids. And I also think about how we live in a world where we're all easily distracted. We're all kind of ADD. I wonder how you talk to parents about that, because I imagine that you would want to really set a lot of boundaries around the use of technology and people being on their phone. I mean, when I go to the playground, lots of parents and nannies are on their phone, and I'm always like, is that a That seems like it's taking them away from attunement. And I wonder how you talk to parents about that.
Yeah, no, it's a big issue. I try to get people to put the devices away, as much as possible when they're with their kids, and try to not get too wrapped up in sort of playing games with kids on phones and stuff also, because that's the kind of, kids are so fascinated with technology also. But yeah, parents, the kind of dependence on devices is bad. And even if it's an addiction really for everybody, and it definitely adds into the sort of splintered, distracted kind of culture that we live in. So, I'll often tell people, if now it's different in pandemic times because everyone's working from home, but a lot of times when I would have parents who would be coming home, getting off the subway, walking home to kind of prepare themselves on their journey from, on the train, you can look at your phone as much as you want, but when you come up those subway steps, this is your preparation time to full engagement with your kid for whatever, an hour till they go to sleep, 2 hours till they're asleep, unless you're like a neurosurgeon who's on call. Really? Do you really need to have your phone with you at all times? I don't think you do. Also, if there's some issue around that, maybe you play tag team with your spouse or your partner. You kind of are like, okay, I'm going to be with them for this next half an hour. Here's my phone. If, text or call comes through from work, come and get me. It's you don't need it. Right, so you can prepare yourself.
And so much of it is modeling too, because if your child is seeing you on the phone all the time, they're going to be super excited by using it too.
Yeah.
And just to comment about the addictive quality, I mean, it's pretty wild. If John and I have the TV on, my daughter she's 3.5 months, and she just looks at the TV screen with excitement.
Yeah.
So even then, and they're not even processing what's happening. It's that light, that intensity. I mean, it's just you see how it can be such a fixation.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. It is scary. And it's just getting, and I remember, my daughter's almost 30 now, but I remember when she was also a baby, and this was even before cell phones. It was just sort of the television, the screen, and then the first computers. It's just there's something about it. I'm sick of them, but it's now that we have to do it this all the time, it's get me away from screens. But I think also we have to let parents off the hook a tiny bit with this, though, not in their behavior, but in the understanding of why it happens, because everyone is so sort of depleted sometimes in parenting that the only way that they know to disengage from their kids while being with their kids is to go to their phone, right? So the kids are playing and they're just sort of and a stressed out, tired dad or mom is just sitting there, they don't know how to just self-soothe in that moment. So what do? They'd go to check Instagram, or they go they're not. And so another thing I like to work with parents on, and I'll even send them to sort of mindfulness experts, or get them to do some meditation apps, or just learn how to just be present in the moment without having to look at something, right? To just sit there, to just space out, to just think, right? Or maybe there's some household chore that they can involve themselves with while the kid is playing. Or, it's they don't go to the phone.
It's a muscle. You have to really train yourself not to just automatically, because oftentimes if I'm going to my phone, I don't even realize I am.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking passively, and it's so unconscious. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And think about how weird it must be for a baby or a toddler who doesn't really know what a phone is, or what's in there, to see an adult constantly looking at this weird box.
I know,
what's in the box? Strange. It's so weird.
Yeah. And also, if you think about it, if it's that hard for people like us who are involved in engagement with other people, right? This is what we do. For us, it's even hard, right? So for people who don't even have that kind of, motivation, it's sort of go for the phone.
Right. It's impossible for a kid.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of time. And, we talked about all of these resources out there, and it's hard to know what's good, what's not. Do you have any kind of go-to book recommendations or things that you recommend to parents to look into?
Yeah, I do have a few things that I always come back to and that I'll recommend. One, again, is I'll send you guys sort of links and information if you kind of can put it on the
link notes.
Yeah. So I'm a real fan of, some old time people who are still really relevant. The work of Ron Taffel, who's very, one of his great classic books is Nurturing Good Children Now, which is about, just values and morals and creating sort of good citizens, people who are empathic and aware of others. So anything he does, I think, is great. I'm also, Bonnie Harris has a great book, which is called When Your Kids Push Your Buttons and What to Do About It. And what's nice about her work is it's very self-reflective. And she has a bunch of worksheets to go through about challenging your assumptions about what behavior means and noticing your agenda and your kids' agenda and where they cross over and where they don't, projections and a lot of sort of inner self work that parents can do so that they don't get so easily triggered by their kids. So I recommend Bonnie Harris. Like I said, the Jed Baker book, No More Meltdowns, is a good one. What else? The classic How to Listen to Your Kids So Your Kids Will Talk and Talk to Your Kids So Your Kids Will Listen by, I forget, Malish and I think I can't remember what the other woman's name is, but it's a classic book which also has comics that you can follow. So visual kind of representations of of scripts almost of how to talk to kids at different developmental stages, and it's very much about, again, empathic listening, and not blaming, not using blaming language. They don't go quite as far as I do, where I ask parents to take on the feelings of the kids, which is sort of my thing. Just sort of it's for little kids. It's you do what you think the kid is feeling, and then go through the acts of solving and fixing it for yourself. But what's really great about those books are also for parents who don't necessarily have a lot of sort of book smart intellectual proclivities. Those are really great kind of scripts for them. And then I'm a big fan of the Gottman work for transition to parenthood for people who are pregnant, going through the early stages of parenthood, and that's really about the couple relationship. And so it's the Gottmans are couples therapists, and but this is the work they particularly do with transition to parenthood for new parents. And I think the first book is called Bringing Baby Home or something like that. But yeah, so those are my main go-tos. And I know there are plenty of other ones out there now too, but
it's great. Yeah, we'll definitely put a link in our session notes. Yeah. And if you could give, we always ask this question at the end of our interviews, if you could give parents one piece of advice, what would you give them? Maybe we can narrow it down to new parents.
Yeah, new parents.
Right.
If you give us one piece of advice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Take 10 deep breaths and then trust your gut.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll try and take that in.
It's not easy. I mean, it's daunting, right? It's sort of
trusting your gut is hard.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, when you're anxious and you're so worried about doing the right thing, it's you lose access to that.
Yeah. And also, trust your gut. Do what your gut tells you, and if it doesn't work out, do something else. Right? Right?
You can always change.
You can always change.
Yeah. That's important.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much for your time. This was really helpful.
Great. Well, thank you
Yes.
guys for having me. It was really fun talking to you, and good luck with your little babies.
Thank
you.
Mm-hmm.